So here we just talk everything sales and try to learn what has worked for you over the years, try to glean from your experiences and hear a few advice you're willing to share with other salespeople out there. So we'll start with sales strategy. We want to know there a lot of salespeople out there, especially software salespeople, have different strategies that work for them, that is unique to them as well.
Mm.
So, would you mind sharing with us a sales strategy or technique that has worked for you in your role? It could be your current role or your previous role in software sales that you think others can adopt.
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks so much for asking. I would say the key strategy I rely on heavily has to be being very personable. And I know a lot of people talk about, like, okay, how do you ensure to personalize at scale, especially when it comes to tech sales and trying to reach out to as many people as possible. But I always aim to, especially when it comes to like the discovery call, I will do a lot of research actually to better understand my prospect. That way, if there are different things that we can relate on, I will actually mention it and state it off the bat. That way, are starting off of a basis of more like friendship, like a friend talking to one another versus them talking to a random stranger. And most times, let's be honest, people don't like salespeople, right? Like, in the sense that a lot of people are skeptical of us. And that's because of the old, like, sleazy salesman kind of thing, right? And so the way I really disarm the conversation is to really bring it human to human level. And so, for example, if someone has like a poster or like, for example, I have a plant, right? I call myself a plant mom. If I was speaking to a prospect, I would actually mention, "Oh, I see how you have plants in the background. Some of my plants have died. Like, how is yours doing?" Really, just to break the ice and make sure that I am personalizing it to the individual. So that's one key strategy that I will always take. The second is to really know who else needs to be involved within that sales process. And so multi-threading stakeholders I found, especially when it comes to larger deals, are really, really important. And in cases where I have forgotten to multi-thread or ask, like, okay, what are other key decision makers that are a part of this sales cycle? I often find that those deals are very hard to close later on because then I haven't gotten the chance to objection handle with an additional buyer in the process as well. So multi-threading is something I will start off the bat, even in my discovery call, to understand who else needs to be a part of the buying journey. And then I would say, not I think that the third one is just like not being afraid to ask for help from either like my manager or other team players on the team, just to see and try different other strategies that maybe I might not be aware of. So those would be the three things: personal, multi-threading, and also asking for help when it's needed.
I like the fact that you combined it with all your techniques with different stages in the tech sales journey, from the SDR role to the AE role and then to leadership. And I like the first point you mentioned about personalizing your approach. It's really a great way to create rapport. And when you connect with the other person, because you're speaking with a human, it's a
Yeah.
human. No
Yeah.
matter whatever you're selling, it's human to human. So the earlier a salesperson connects with the other person, the more likely the deal is to progress to the next stage. I like that. So personalization is really key for all salespeople. So, like obviously every salesperson knows whether you've been in sales for a month, for 2 months, for 6 months, for years, it comes with its ups and downs. It's
Yeah.
topsy-turvy. There are a lot of challenges you face as a salesperson. Even if you're not selling software, you're not selling technology, you're doing retail sales, it's tough, it's difficult. But then again, there are some challenges people face, and the way one person handles one challenge will be different from the way the other person handles a challenge. For you, what are some challenges you faced over these years in tech sales? And what are some ways you've been able to handle it and successfully figure your way out?
That's a really good question. I will break it down in terms of challenges, one within the industry, and then the other within like being a really high performer within a role.
I like
So the
that.
first challenge within the industry I would say is particularly when it comes to career development and mobility. And so, everyone at the end of the day is motivated by a few things in the job, right? Number one is either the dollars in terms of the finances, the
Yeah.
financial compensation. The
Hmm.
second item could be, the opportunity for growth. Sometimes a role might not pay a lot, but it has the opportunity for growth is immense there, and there's a lot to learn. Or number three, there's an opportunity to really network and have it as a stepping stone for something else. So, in scenarios where after I find for myself, after 9 months to a year within a role, I start to get a little bit bored in the sense that I feel like, I have learned a lot in those 9 months to a year. And I'm really someone who is super curious and I love to really continuously learn new things, new techniques, and feel like I am progressing through my career. And so, one of the challenges I've had in the past is, getting to that 9 year to 9 years, 9 months, excuse me, timeline, and then really wondering, okay, do I either want to continue growing within this company internally and what are my options? Or how do I do the same, whether a role or a higher role within a different company? And what would the financial compensation be in both scenarios? Because we're salespeople, finances are also important. I mean, if you're helping a company really hit their revenue goals, it's important that you're also being fairly compensated for that. And so I found that it was challenging quite a few times when it comes to trying to move up internally, right? Like in terms of progressing in the career and in scenarios where I did move up internally within a company, your compensation is does not change significantly compared to, like, let's say you move to a different company
I
or
agree.
you're hired.
I
Right?
agree. Yeah.
And so within that challenge of, like, not being able to, let's say, have that upward mobility that I wanted in my career. What I did about that and navigated is, I mean, first I had a conversation with my manager to say, hey, what are the options here within this company? What timeline? What is the career progression? And what do you need to see? And what does leadership need to see in order for an individual to be promoted, let's say, to an AE role, right? And so, or any other kind of career pathways. And one of the things I find is that if the timeline, or I'm having multiple conversations and the things are not lining up, right, in terms of, like, people are saying one thing one day, the next day is another thing, that is a signal to start looking. And I think it's a healthy thing, right? Because in most cases, companies are also looking out for their best interest. Of course, even with employees, if someone is not performing well, they'll give chances. But in the same way as employees, we can give employers chances, but we should also look out for our best interest as well. And so, in the scenario where, for me, I found out the timeline was just way too long and things weren't adding up, I was able to successfully secure a new role that literally my total, like, OTE went up by like 40K. I went from like an OTE of about 77K to 115K. And so for me, that was a no brainer. And so for anyone that's out there that's listening that is in a tech sales role, and you're looking for to either earn more money or learn more within your role or within the career and industry, for sure make sure you have those conversations internally to see what your options are. But don't be afraid to also start looking and putting yourself out there, whether it's on LinkedIn or speaking to recruiters to see what additional options might be out there for you. So that's one challenge. I can pause there. Do you want me to keep going on the second challenge as well?
Please go ahead.
The second challenge would be primarily within the role. And one of the things that we all know in tech sales is quota. Sometimes we breathe, sleep, and eat quota attainment, right?
Yeah.
And so I would be lying if I didn't say, like, sometimes I found it overwhelming, right? To kind of manage and understand how I can attain my quota, especially because sometimes, like, you can have a really strong month and hit your quota at 100%. But the psychology of that, like each month, you're really starting from zero and you're starting again, and you have to hype yourself back up and have strategies in place to make sure that you're consistently delivering on quota. And so my challenge sometimes have been that, okay, I will reach I'll do really strong 1 month. You're kind of like, it's a long distance, but sometimes I sprint too fast. And then I get really tired at the beginning of the month. And then I'm trying to play catch up by the middle of the month to make it up for the rest. So, with that challenge, one of the things that has really helped me is number one, just having kind of like a routine that resets my brain. And what I mean by that is, sales, I find, is also very psychological, right? If you think you're going to hit quota, your brain will help you figure out how to do it. If you think you're not going to hit quota and you just freak out, your brain will help you do just that as well. And so I find that having a morning routine that just helps me ground myself and reinforce my capabilities, my abilities, and really affirm that I am amazing at what I do is number one, a game changer in that like psychological thinking, and also in the practical sense, like starting my day with like a movement, whether that's like going for a quick walk, working out, whatever that is, just to have my brain reset always helps. And then on the tactical side, what I will do is actually look through my pipeline and really assess, okay, based on especially if you're in an AE role, I find that this is really helpful. Based on the pipeline that I have, by the end of this week, who can I move the needle forward with, right? What are like my top 6 accounts that if I really, take a number of like different channels, I can really provide as much value to them and either push them to the next stage or close them for that week. I find that doing that and really, writing the context of the account, but also adding, okay, what are key things I could either send them through email. How many times do I want to call them in a day? Am I going to use other channels? Am I going to create a video for them? Am I going to reach out to other people on the team using LinkedIn or other social channels as well? And so having that game plan, I find really helps subdue the anxiety of quota. And I also would even share that with my manager to get a second opinion to see, like, oh, is there anything else in addition that I can do with this strategy for these 6 accounts that you think might be beneficial to move the needle forward as well? And so, yeah, that's how I handle the challenge around, attaining quota is really having a psychological game plan, but also a tactical game plan.
I love the first point you mentioned about being able to basically understand that you need to have that conversation with your manager. What do I need to do to get to the next level? And I can relate to what you said a lot about being bored after a few months, especially so for someone that is really adventurous and curious. I understand how it feels, but understanding that okay, there's a next stage and I can actually attain it and probably make more money could help the person. And I also love how you approach the second problem. It's always a mindset. So when you feel your mindset is limiting you and you can reach the goal, you start believing it, you start manifesting it. It's just not motivational, it's just how things are.
Yeah.
So that psychology, thinking that I can actually do this and I can work towards doing it, having that positive mindset can actually really be a huge boost to achieving your quota for the month. I love that approach. And it's said a lot of times, but it might seem basic, but funny enough, many salespeople don't do it. There's still that the thing is still, it's just magic. It starts from the day one, how you think about it, how you approach it, how you view it, would materialize into actually achieving that goal. I think the next question actually relates to what you've already said around career progression, habits that you probably think you formed over the years, or some personal rituals that you've consistently been doing that has helped you to grow in your career. You've mentioned it a bit about taking walks and having conversations. Are there any other ones that come to your mind?
Oh, yes, there's quite a few. As you were saying that question, I can still remember how I prep for like cold calls. I don't do as many cold calls now, but for cold calls, I
Yeah.
will prep my mind because in a cold call like batch or sprint, you're bound to get a rejection, right?
Definitely.
And so what I would do is I would pick a few songs, like mostly the Afrobeats songs, that like just high energy song that makes me feel good about myself before I start my cold call batch. Let's say when I am filtering for which accounts or prospects I'm gonna call, I will literally blast that speaker high, dance a little as I'm like prepping for it. And I
Increase your
find
energy
like to give me energy.
because you know you're going to fight a war.
Exactly. You don't know who you're calling. You don't know what
True.
kind of date they have had. Even though we know that it has nothing to do with us, really, right? Even
Yeah.
if somebody, maybe say something really mean over the phone, you have to shrug it off. And so that's the routine or ritual I always do before a cold call. Other rituals I will do, of course, before any call is just like quickly reviewing everything on Salesforce or HubSpot, whatever CRM I'm using for that company, just to review all of my notes and make sure that everything is ready so I don't re-ask the same questions, because there's nothing more annoying I find sometimes for prospect, and even from the other side of sometimes purchasing software, then having mentioned something or like answering the questions and then having to repeat yourself, right? It feels like a waste of time for the prospect. So I really don't want that scenario to happen. And so that's a ritual I will do before hopping on a call with a prospect. Other rituals would definitely be each week. I would say, like what I mentioned earlier, just seeing like, okay, like, where am I pacing with my quota? And then how, like, break it down into like measurable chunks. And so, if let's say the quota is like, I don't know, six closed deals each month, that's like 1.5 each week, right? And then seeing like, okay, from my pipeline, can I close two this week, and having a strategy for for those. But other than that, I would say also within each role I've had, I will always have like that like work bestie, right? That like I message so that when things are not going right, I can rant to. I think that's actually really important, especially if you work in a remote setting,
Mhm.
right? Again, tech sales, it's can have very challenging days, right? Where you've done everything you can on this account and it might not be moving the needle forward. And so I find that being able to have conversations with my colleagues where we can just like rant and share some of like our frustrations and bond over that. And then sometimes, we provide each other with like tips on like, okay, how this might work or what doesn't work. But I find that that's super, super important in a remote setting. As a ritual for me is reconnecting with my colleagues as well.
Superb. Like I love that, especially the Afrobeats part music. Music is therapeutic. It's spiritual, right? It helps you. It helps change your mood from just zero to probably like 10 real quick. So whether you're having good days or you're having bad days, music could be a way to help you and uplift your spirit. And I like the fact that you make those music to get you hyper before you make the calls, so that even if whatever rejections you're gonna get, maybe cuss words or just hang up, you can just keep
Yeah.
making the calls. That's really good. And then the second one you mentioned about breaking your big goals into smaller tasks, exactly what I was saying earlier. It's also something a lot of people have been hearing, but yet it's difficult for them to implement it, right? You have this big quota. How can you break it down into smaller tasks? Probably you have like, for SDRs, you might have like a quota of maybe booking 12 meetings in a month. How can you divide that into the number of working days you have for the month? Divide it into two weekly and then work towards it. Okay. So if you see it as as a big number, it might seem very huge. But when you see it as, okay, I'm just gonna try and book 3 meetings each week, it's smaller, it's more achievable. I like that. And also having a work bestie, having someone in your corner. There's something I always say, that sales is not done in silo.
No.
You don't sell alone, right? And that's why sometimes remote work can come with its own unique challenges, especially in sales, right? I don't know, but I feel sometimes working in an office sometimes could be some sort of a blessing for some kind of sales. upskilling, ramping up faster, and be more focused. In as much as remote work has its own, huge benefits, I think that's a whole lot of conversation on its own.
Yeah.
I think there's also some setbacks with remote work, distraction and all that.
Yeah. I
Okay,
always
yeah.
find though that it depends on how leadership arranges the team, right? So
Oh, really?
I've been a part of teams where the aspect of, feeling as though like you're just in the office, I really felt that. And the way they implemented that in terms of leadership was having things like, okay, if we're having a call sprint or cold call sprint, we're all going to hop on a Zoom together. Everybody put yourself on mute, right? Everyone is doing their calls together. And then at the end of that call sprint, people share, hey, this is what worked, this is what didn't. That way, in the next call sprint, you can implement that, right? So that was one of the ways to like make sure we were learning from one another in like and simulating that setting of being on the sales floor together. Another way I've seen this like implemented well in a remote setting is definitely on the side of having weekly, what are they called? Weekly lunch and learns within the team, right? So basically a roundtable of each individual on that like department or team coming and sharing like, okay, what is one key strategy that they're using that is helping them close deals or achieve quota that has worked in the last week. So that's another thing that I found that it worked. And also, I would say the third one would be having frequent check-ins with the team. And so having team calls at least minimum once a week, sometimes twice a week, so that there is that environment where you can quickly share your challenges. Because I had an amazing manager where in these calls you would have the opportunity to share, okay, what are you struggling with? That way, it can be you can get tips right away, not just from the manager, but from the rest of the team. So those were three strategies. And I would say the fourth one on top of that was also actually having virtual social activities that people can come and just like we would play games online just to like kind of mimic social hour or happy hour, excuse me. And so within a remote setting, of course, there are definitely challenges, like unique challenges when it comes to tech sales. But I believe that if leadership has the right systems in place, there is a way to really mimic that on the sales floor, learning from one another and upskilling opportunity as well.
I like that. I like that. Remote work has come to stay. So managers would want to stay innovative to give employees that feel of an office as well from their homes. Nice. So now let's talk about some skills with the surge of AI and with the whole innovation happening in tech sales and the software space. What skills do you think are really crucial or important for an SDR or an AE or a sales manager to thrive in software sales space in this current century and coming 2025? What are those skills you feel like, these ones are core, they're most important, they're the basics that every salesperson out there selling software or selling some solution or even selling a technology service should have or a must have? What are those skills for you?
Hmm. Great question. So one of the first skills off the bat, of course, is I have to mention, the use of AI, right? And using AI to optimize for productivity and efficiency. And so what this looks like, on the day to day for tech sales is like, how are you basically using tools that make it quicker for you to get your job done, number one, but also provide a better experience for the prospects or accounts that you are working with. And so, one of the simplest way to do this again comes back to that personalization at scale that I was mentioning earlier. So, for example, especially when it comes to selling to enterprise accounts, we know that a lot of times they will have public reports, SEC filings, or annual reports that they share what their primary goals and objectives are for the following year or for the current year. Rather than sending a generic email or reaching out with a generic messaging, we can actually, and this is something I have used, is use ChatGPT to basically comb through that entire report for you, right? You don't have to spend hours reading like a 200-page report to really pull out, okay, what are the key initiatives and strategies that is really important to that company for the year, and then positioning your product or your technology service to address that challenge or that goal that they might have for the year, right? And so this provides AI, especially ChatGPT, I think, especially when it comes to the messaging front, provides the ability to personalize at scale on a company level or on an industry level as well. So the ability to just take key trends and key reports from the industry and tie that to your messaging so it is hyper relevant for whoever is reading it as well. So that would definitely be one. The second thing, I would also say that in terms of skill, that would be really important would have to be using AI tools throughout the entire funnel, right? And so even when it comes to, I'm thinking from like a more operations like leadership roles, is how do you utilize different AI tools that show buying intent and signals as a way to better improve the sales funnel? That way you're bringing in the most almost like pre-qualified leads into the sales funnel. There are a number of like AI tools now out there that really focus on optimizing for buying intent and signals. That way, time is being spent on customers that are interested than people that are not just a fit with the ICP in general. And then, of course, would be really using AI tools to improve on like training and like coaching and development for the team. And so, of course, I know that tools such as like Gong in the past have, well, I think Gong still does this in terms of like call recordings and really using that insights tab as a way to really gain feedback on the call and what could have been done better. But in the case that a team, let's say, is not using Gong because Gong is also pretty pricey and they're just using a regular recorder, even if it's just like a regular note taker, again, you can use a note taker and ChatGPT together to give you insights on how you can improve your call, right? So this can look as simple as, uploading the transcript of the call into ChatGPT and then asking for feedback based on whatever scenario has happened. So let's say if the person did move on to the next stage or they gave you a specific feedback, you can then use that to tailor how you move forward from that account. And so those are the three scenarios I could really think about in terms of like implementing and complementing your skills with AI is really when it comes to, personalizing that skill, number one, improving the sales funnel with AI tools that improve with buyer intent and signals. But then thirdly, as mentioned, is with continuous coaching and training.
I like that. The truth of the matter is, like, when ChatGPT came out and a lot of people were, speculating it was going to take out some job and blah, blah, blah. You know, Obviously, of course, it's going to eliminate some roles, no doubt, but it's not just going to take everybody's job. Salespeople need to learn to leverage AI tools to, make their work more efficient, save more time, because sales is time consuming. You still want to have some time for yourself. So if you have access to those tools, use them to speed up your process and you can get, you know, really big things done in a smaller time. So everybody needs to work more efficiently
Yeah.
so that, you could achieve a lot more things like that. I'm just going to ask you this right off the bat. When it comes to dialers, which is your favorite? Which do you prefer?
Yeah, it's been a while I've
Okay, what was the last
used
one you used? Which was the last one?
no, no, no. I still use the dialer this year,
Okay.
but the ones that I'm going to say specifically that I use, it's been a while I used it, but I remember when I used it, I loved it so much. It was Orem. It's a power dialer. So I believe another one that's really popular right now, and it seems like
Yeah, Nooks.
uh, Nooks, exactly, is
Yeah,
Nooks.
buzzing.
But yeah, Orem, I really, really liked the ability to just like quickly power dial on that, made it super. quick to like go through call tasks and then just engage with people that wanted to have a conversation.
Yeah, Orem, great dialer. Have been in the market for a very long time. Nukes, I think just to dig a little deep on the two dialers because they are the two leading at the moment.
Yeah.
Orem is an older dialer. You know, the leaders are more older, millennials and all that. Nux is more like a Gen Z
Millennial is
dialer.
old now?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Orem is an old dialer. Nux is more like young Stanford graduates that are very have this sharp tech skills that are trying to, modernize the whole dialing thing. But great
Yeah.
dialers all the same.
Makes sense. Maybe it's because I haven't gotten a chance to use nukes. So I
Mhm.
don't know the difference in the experience. So maybe if I try nukes, my opinion might change. But yeah, Orem is the only one I've tried in those two dialers.
Yeah, Orem is great. I've tried or I've used Orem, I've used Concerts and that older dial as well.
Okay.
They've been in the market for years before. Nux is just barely 4 or 5 years,
Yeah, nukes is a recent startup.
Yeah. So when it comes to building relationship, because sales is all about building relationship,
Hmm.
building and maintaining relationship, right? So what would you say is one approach that has helped you? I know you've mentioned about personalization when it comes to starting the relationship, but then when it comes to building relationship and maintaining that relation, is there a specific approach you might you've noticed that has is there something you think you do that you've not mentioned that helps you to build and maintain relationship with buyers much faster
Mm.
that people don't know yet?
Well, there are a few things. Number one is like it's not even about it's not something that is a secret or that people don't know.
Okay.
I just bring my energy. So I
You bring
am
your authentic
I bring
self.
my authentic self. I
I
bring
like
the
that.
energy. And so I mean everyone is different. There are different types of sellers, right? Because I tend to be more on the extroverted extroverted side, excuse me. It's easier for me to just be like high energy on a call. And usually high energy is infectious, right?
It is.
And especially as human beings, we also like will mirror different things that we see in front of us.
True.
And
And feed
so
off energy as
we feed
well.
off energy, exactly. And so I will also, in bringing high energy, I would try to smile. I'm not like forced smiling, but I find that like being jovial and bringing that energy and smiling whenever it feels natural to actually is then like gradually like reflected during that call. If it's a video call, I find that it's a lot easier to have that connection and build that strong relationship. The other second thing that I do is I try to figure out things that are important to the buyer beyond work. And so I know I mentioned earlier regarding plants, sometimes, especially when I was working within the health tech industry, because these are professionals that are really busy in terms of like our buyers. They were just they had so much things on their plate a lot of the times. I would try to just understand, like, okay, what are some of the things that make their days better? Is it like a cup of coffee? Is it donuts? Is it something else, right? And whenever that is shared with me, I make a note of it. I mean, sometimes it's not a thing. It could also be that, hey, they have a kid that might be sick, or they're going to their kid's recital next week. So they're really excited about that. Or let's say somebody in their family has just gotten engaged. Like people share this information with me because I build that environment where they can. And because there's that understanding or environment where they can share that, I also make sure I don't forget it, right? I will have that in my notes so that it's something I can talk about later, whether it's like, hey, like in building rapport and in the next conversation, hey, like how did the wedding go, or how did the Christmas party go, how was your kids recital? Those are things I will actually state in a call, as a way, number one, show that I was actually listening to them, right? But also on a human to human level, like when you're talking to your friends, if you haven't seen a friend in like a week and they've shared something with you, you would follow up on it, right? So
Sure,
I just
sure.
treat people like they're humans in that sense and also follow up on that when they've shared something maybe like that is important to them beyond just their work as well. And in what I mentioned earlier on, asking people what makes their days easier, if there's a way, especially if there's budget internally, to support clients in that way, I will also send it. So if it's like a Starbucks gift card to make their day a little bit easier, or using DoorDash to deliver some donuts, I will also do that to again make and contribute to making their day a little bit easier as well.
I like the fact that you're intentional about finding what matters to people outside work because, like I hinted earlier, sales is human to human. If you're not selling to that person and you just probably want to strike up a conversation, you will start a conversation with the
Yeah.
person. And if someone is your friend, you naturally want to know what's up with the person. So approaching it from that lens would really help to, start and foster relationship. So let's just wrap up basically. Jolabo, do you have any general advice you share with anyone that is probably listening, not minding their role in sales, whether BDR, SDR, AE, account managers, whatever customer facing or sales role they're currently in? Are there any final advice you give to them just to
Yeah. Great question. My final advice would be that you're in the control seat. Sometimes in tech sales, I found sometimes it feels as though there are so many things I can't control, right? You can do a lot for different customer facing accounts, and you are not maybe seeing the results, or even if you're seeing the results again with quotas, it starts all over again. And it can, that part of like not feeling in control can not feel great, not just in terms of a sense of like within your role, but in terms of like your career trajectory as well, and your whatever individual long term goals and plans that you have. And so my encouragement or advice would be to, number one, remind yourself that you're in the control seat, and that for the things that you can control, you can take and create actionable steps. And for the things that you can't control, just leave it. You don't need to spend extra hours having headache or stressing about it. But for the ones that you can control, create actionable, break it down into small steps, like I mentioned earlier, and then start taking small little steps towards it, right? So if you're a BDR looking to become an AE, set up conversations with AEs that are within your current company, right? How can you better support them? Or is there an opportunity for a specific project that you could maybe help lead between AEs and BDRs if you see that there is a gap? And then that becomes an opportunity for you to showcase to leadership that you have what it takes, but you're also a self starter. Same goes to if you're more senior in your role and you're maybe trying to pivot to a different part of tech sales, right? Because there's so many different roles that you can um, go into. I always find that the best way to pivot into a role is to actually ask someone who is just one or two steps ahead of you, right? Because I find that if you ask advice from someone who is like 10 years higher than like your current state, you're speaking two different languages, number one. And number two, what may have worked for them in their like trajectory might not be what will work for you because the industry has changed. The best thing to do is to talk to someone who is 2 years, 3 years ago, or even a year ago, they were in the exact same position as you. And that provides you leverage in the sense that you get the informational gap that you might have to go from where you are currently to the next part. So it's so important to network internally within your team if that is something you're looking to do, but also don't be afraid to network externally as well and reach out to individuals, whether it's on LinkedIn, on Slack community channels dedicated for tech sales. But if there are any questions you have or support you need in your journey, my DMs are open on LinkedIn and you can ask me any questions as well.
thank you so much for sharing that. You are in the driver's seat, so take charge of your career, take charge of control what you can control and what you cannot control. Just let it be, do your best and seek out advice